Welcome back to Decode Healthcare with Harshal. Now, in our last explainer, part 12, we covered the incredible power of the word with and how it actually assumes a causal relationship in your coding manual. Today, we are mastering the traffic signs of the alphabetic index. Our mission for this explainer is to completely break down the exact functional difference between two massive cross-reference terms, see and see also.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever hit a complete, infuriating dead end in the alphabetic index? You totally know the feeling. You're right in the middle of a tight production shift at the hospital, or even worse, you're sitting for a high-stakes certification exam, the clock is ticking down, and you're just flipping pages back and forth, totally lost. Well, today we put an end to that. We're going to master these traffic directors so you never ever get stuck in a dead-end search again. All right, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the overarching index traffic directors. Second, the command, see. Third, the suggestion, see also. And finally, we'll tackle the exam time waster trap. Part 1, the index traffic directors. Okay, before we look at any other coding manual or textbook, we absolutely have to establish our one true source of truth. We are looking directly at the CMS ICD-10-CM official guidelines for coding and reporting, specifically section IA-116, which covers cross-references. Now listen, while textbooks like Bucks's step-by-step medical coding are incredibly helpful for practice, this specific CMS guideline strictly overrides any secondary material, period. It is the federal standard dictating exactly how we must route our code searches in the alphabetic index. And there is a massive functional difference between the two terms we're focusing on today. On one side, we have see, which is essentially an absolute mandatory detour. When you hit it, think of a giant neon roadblock dropping down in front of you. You must follow it. On the flip side, we have see also, which is much more like a scenic route. It's an optional specificity upgrade, if you will. Moving on to part 2, the command, see. Let's really dig into this first traffic director, the strict command known as see. We need to look exactly at how the CMS defines this requirement. Look at the literal language used in section IA-16. It is necessary to go to the main term referenced. The absolutely crucial point here is that see is not a suggestion, guys. It is a mandatory command that you must obey. It's an explicit direction telling you to look elsewhere because the term you just looked up literally has no codes listed under it. Let's apply this using a real example directly from our source texts. Step 1. You go to the alphabetic index and you look up the main term nephritis. But right away in step 2, you encounter a giant roadblock. Next to your term, it just aggressively points away and says, see nephrosis. There are no codes printed next to your original term, none at all. So step 3, you must immediately pivot. You have to flip over to the end section and look under nephrosis to find the actual valid codes. Because if you try to stay on your original page when you hit a C note, you're going to find exactly 0 codes. That is how many codes exist if you stubbornly stay where you are, 0. You have to make that mandatory detour because the index simply does not have the information you need in that initial spot. All right, part 3, the suggestion, see also. Let's see how this builds into the second half of section IA-16, the see also cross-reference. Now, this is where things get a little bit more nuanced, and it's honestly where coders often get tripped up. What's really interesting about the official CMS language here is this phrase, it is not necessary to follow the see also note. The CMS officially gives you permission to just ignore the detour entirely if your current term already gives you the exact code you need. It is completely conditional. Think of see also as the index casually saying, hey, I have standard codes right here that work perfectly well, but there's another glowing pathway over there if you want cooler, more specialized options. For instance, if you look up the word aberrant for a congenital condition, the index provides standard codes right there on the page, but it also gives you a see also malposition congenital note. If your documentation simply says aberrant artery and you find a code that matches perfectly, you're done. You lock it in. You only follow that see also pathway if the specific clinical details you are searching for cannot be found under that first main term. Which brings us perfectly to part 4, the exam time waster trap. This is a highly practical application of these guidelines, especially for those of you actively preparing for your CPC or CCS certification exams. This is where mastering the difference between these two notes literally pays off. 2 precious minutes. That is the average time coders waste on exams, frantically flipping pages back and forth, following a see also rabbit hole when the exact, perfect primary code was already staring them right in the face. When that exam clock is ticking down fast, you cannot afford to go on optional scenic routes unless the documentation demands it.
Let's lock this down with a quick strategy table. Scenario 1, you see absolutely no codes, just a C note. Your strategy? Pivot immediately. Do not waste a single second. Scenario 2, you find a perfect code that matches your documentation right under the main term, but there is a see also note sitting next to it. Strategy? Stick and lock it in. Ignore that detour. Scenario 3, you only have a vague code under your main term, but your documentation is highly detailed, and you see a see also note. Strategy? Now you pivot to find that greater clinical specificity. Knowing exactly when to stick and when to pivot based on these traffic directors will save you a massive amount of time.
All right, that wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this explainer with your fellow coding students so you don't miss our next breakdown. In part 14, we are tackling code also notes and default codes. Those are the absolute vital guidelines that ensure you never accidentally leave important secondary diagnoses off your claim forms.
Until next time, keep studying those CMS guidelines. And ask yourself, are you just reacting to the alphabetic index, letting it push you around, or have you mastered the guidelines so you are firmly in the driver's seat of your coding manual? Keep mastering those codes, and I'll see you in the next explainer.